So this has sort of been a long time coming. I have a number of World War II games, but it's never been my real enthusiasm in the hobby of wargaming, even though the hobby itself is essentially dominated by World War II titles, particularly your Eastern Front stuff. I never particularly went after any of the East Front, the big East Front games, or your grail games like Case Blue or Gunarian's Blitzkrieg or things like that. For me, my primary interest is always in the North Africa front of World War II. I was, fairly ambivalent about the rest of World War II, even though a sort of testament to how pervasive the topic is in the wargaming hobby, despite the fact that it's not nearly my biggest area of interest in wargaming. I still have almost the majority, not the majority of my collection, but I have almost more World War II games than any other type of game, or than any other subject in my collection, which should tell you something about how it's almost just unavoidable. If you're into wargaming, you will have some World War II games. You'll probably have a lot of World War II games, even if you're not a huge World War II buff. But for me, North Africa has always been the most interesting to me, and I'm not sure why exactly. Something about maybe the nature of the terrain there, this idea of these wide open vistas, this desert warfare, and just wide open terrain full of this massive and fast maneuvering by armies of tanks. There's something interesting about it, and I guess you could say that if you're interested in wide open terrain and massive tank movements, wouldn't East Front be your thing? But I don't know. Maybe East Front isn't my thing. Well, partly because in the East Front it's Russians versus Nazis, and there's no real I should say Soviets versus Nazis, and there's no real good guys there. So from an American perspective or a Western democracy perspective, we tend to focus on the Western Front in Europe, or on Italy, or on North Africa. Places where the United States and Great Britain, to a lesser extent France, fought. So, that might be part of it too. Also, maybe the overexposure of East Front. I feel like there's just a lot more East Front out there in the wargaming hobby than North Africa. There's a fair share of North Africa stuff, though, but I actually, in terms of what I own, I think I only have one other North Africa game. I think it's No Retreat. I might have an old Victory Games title that might deal with North Africa. Maybe not. Victory Games maybe didn't do any North Africa stuff. I don't remember. Nonetheless, part of that was because I was waiting for an opportune time to get the quintessential North Africa game, which is this right here, which is DAK, or DAK. It's the acronym for the German acronym for the Africa Corps. 2. This is the second version of this game, and it typically considered kind of the definitive operational treatment of this particular theater. Hence the high price it goes for in the secondary market. It is out of print. Both printings went out. I don't think quickly. I think this is one of those where people marvel that it's such an expensive Grail game now, considering that it apparently took MMP a while to sell out of all of its copies. So it is the game that Dean Essig himself, the designer of the OCS system, which is this is part of the Operational Combat System or series, it's the game that he said is his favorite design, or the design that he's most proud of. I guess those would be two different things. I think he said it was the design that he was most proud of. So it was one that I had sort of set my sights on, that, if I ever really wanted to do North Africa, quote unquote, right, I would do it with this. So the impediment obviously was that this game goes for minimum $200 in the secondary markets, usually more than that. I got it close to that price, which was finally doable for me. The ones before that I'd seen in the 250 to 275 range, which I just was not quite prepared to go that high. So I found mine much, much closer, right at $200. So it was, finally had a moment in time where the stars sort of aligned and I was able to get this. So I thought we would take a look inside. This is an unpunched copy. You don't always get these kind of games in the secondary market unpunched, but fortunately I did here. So let's first of all take a look at the box. The artwork on the cover, typical gamers artwork, drawing of Rommel here. Not sure about the sort of comic book type script down here at the bottom, but doesn't really blend in with the rest of the design. But it's the thicker box, the older assembled MMP style box, which I don't like. And then typical Gamers design on the back. You can see Gamers there. Even though MMP publishes it, the design is from the old Gamers stuff. Then all their stuff tends to have a similar look to it. So there's the blurb about the game on the back. I guess one advantage of these, folded up, assembled type boxes is that you can get the box lid off with one hand. So nice when you're filming. So the insert slips, which are always nice because those tell you what the game should include. And then it looks like we've got little last minute things. 2 copies of these center 4 pages. So the series rules includes although now the version 3.1 rules for OCS have been superseded by, I think, 4.0 or 4.1. Not sure if it says on there. With Beyond the Rhine, which was the latest OCS publication. I think Reluctant Enemies has the same rule set. Blitzkrieg Legend, maybe like a rule set behind. It's up to 4.1 or 4.2 now, I think. So anyway, I won't actually be using the rules that came with this, since I'll probably just go ahead and use the 4.1 rules. Also notes that counter sheet 4 is intentionally partially blank. So there we go. Plenty of blank markers. Then there's maps. I think there's 5 maps. E, D, C, B, and A. And I'll probably lay those out. Even with my modular tables all lined up in a row, I don't think I'd have enough space to run all those maps. As it's the case with most North Africa games, the maps are very long because it's just all the strip of North African coast, basically. Counter sheet here, typical OCS Gamers style. Got all the German counters here. Luftwaffe. It's the first counter sheet. Everything looks properly aligned. Wouldn't be good in a game this expensive that's in the secondary market to have misaligned counters. Counter sheet 2. Here's your Italians. And sort of the universal coloring of World War II units. has always been, you got your kind of light gray for the Germans. Italians always have this seafoam green color. That seems to be the wargaming industry or wargaming hobby trope for World War II coloring of counters. And then the British are all of your darker brown counters. Honestly not sure what the yellow counters are. Or not the yellow, but orange counters are. I don't know what those represent exactly. I think this is British planes. And then you get into your OCS markers. I don't think these have changed at all for any of the newer versions. Unlike the old Civil War Brigade series games where the markers and units and stuff kind of changed over time, these have all stayed pretty consistent. So, what was that? 2, 3, 4, 5, so 6 counter sheets. About right for one of these monster type games. And here's the series rules, and this is interesting. Because that's like not the normal gamer's style of the cover there. Interesting. Designer's notes. Yeah, those are 3.1 rules, but they have a slightly different, and there's all your counter sheets in there. They do have a slightly different, usually a different layout, or they've moved to a different layout here. The cover usually looks like this, where you've got the title, and then it would say, series rules version 3.1 or whatever. So it's just an interesting cover. I'm not used to seeing that. Even like the older gamers type games and different series than this also still use this same sort of format. So interesting to see that different format. So this looks like the DAK 2 series specific rules. Here's all your setup, all your scenarios, and then it's like maybe 20 pages of game specific rules for DAK 2. Here, more scenario and setup rules, designer's notes, bibliography, and tables, terrain effects, random events, ultra rare events, rare events, and ultra rare. Interesting. More charts in the back. This is identical. Another weather table and random events. And at the bottom is the abstract for map E, looks like, in case you're not using that. So I'll go ahead and lay the maps out on the floor so we can see them all end to end. Well, as you can see, they are not messing around here. I don't even have enough room on my floor to lay this thing out. So it is literally about as wide as the room. I think that's probably 6.5 feet of maps there. So, but you are moving from Eligala all the way across the Gulf of Sidra. You've got Benghazi up there, along all the roads along northern Libya. And somewhere along the way, there it is, Tobruk. And like I said, as is the case with most North African maps, all your fighting is going to be, in about 10 hexes from the coast. There'll be some running across the middle here, maybe, if you try and cut off the British. But this stuff further to the south, there's not going to be a whole lot of units running around in that rougher terrain to the south. Everybody's going to be crammed in along the coasts between escarpments and that terrain along the coast. But it all follows along to until you can see my table was in the way there. I probably could have just moved it, but didn't really want to put that much effort just to lay the maps out. You get the idea of how big this is. So, it's all your typical desert terrain, goes all the way to the Suez, Port Said there, and then, am I missing Alexandria? There it is. So, you've got the whole scale of it all laid out there and probably available to do in the Grand Campaign. So we shall see when I eventually get around to this. I have played Reluctant Enemies now, familiarized myself a little bit with the OCS system, but this would be a whole other ball of wax with its own rules and so forth. Different experience, more units, things like that. But I do look forward to it. Like I said, this is my favorite World War II theater. There's just something about that sort of captures my imagination about the North African front in World War II. So I do look forward to getting to it eventually.